Good morning. This presentation is about early electric maps, which appeared in the second decade of the 20th century. Electricity was emerging as a general-purpose technology, and widespread innovation would follow in areas as diverse as lighting, manufacturing, transportation, and household appliances. It is hardly surprising that some of these innovations were cartographic. I undertook this project to explore the technological sophistication and usefulness of early electric maps. Does complexity improve or undermine utility, I wondered, or are they largely independent? This inquiry builds on my 2017 book, Patents and Cartographic Inventions, which covered a broad range of map-related patents. The final chapter, titled Current Events, barely scratched the surface of what evolved into geospatial technology. That few patented map-related inventions were developed commercially underscores the patent system's role in vetting clever ideas. Although a patent is a property right that can be sold or licensed, it is also a bragging right akin to the article accepted by a refereed journal. The patent system and the refereed journal are parallel gatekeepers that certify originality and identify antecedents. Moreover, the patent examiner mimics the combined judgment of journal editor, peer reviewer, and editorial board, while the patent attorney often serves as a co-author or ghostwriter. The U.S. Patent Classification System and the Google Patents Project identified the directory board patented in the United States in 1915 by August Merk-Wirz as the earliest electric orientation map. Its inventor was a resident of Zurich. Amen. Does this sound better? Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll put it on. Force of habit. But I'm going to go back and repeat myself. Its inventor was a resident of Zurich and an educator of sorts. By 1935, he was director of Institute Minerva, a private school. The patent's primary drawing relates an orientation map to a list of destinations. Next to each destination was a button connected to a lamp on the map. In patent office jargon, any small electric bulb is a lamp. Push a button, and the corresponding lamp lights up, as on a present-day mall map. Tiny numbers on the drawing identify specific features described verbally in a general description of the invention called the specification. Another key part of the patent is a list of claims that comprise the rights holder's intellectual property. The U.S. Patent Office listed all patents in its annual report and sold patents documents with the complete specification and all drawings. To encourage innovation, the office also published a bi-weekly journal with a single drawing and a short description of recent patents. The March 16, 1915 issue of the Official Gazette of the United States Patent Office described Merk-Wirz's invention in a short overview that included his principal drawing and 5 of his 9 claims. By contrast, the published 4-page patent had 3 illustrations and 33 paragraphs. Merk-Wirz was also granted patents in Austria, Canada, France, and Great Britain. The applications were filed in the first half of 1913. He also found indications that he had received patents in Germany, Spain, and Switzerland. The patent's second drawing illustrates the invention's key electrical principles. A circuit diagram describes the flow of current from a battery or power source, 17, through multiple wires, the dashed lines 20, that define 4 separate circuits, each connecting a push button on the directory board with a lamp 10 at the corresponding position on the map. Each push button 11 is connected attached to a metal spring 15 that closes the circuit through the appropriate lamp when the button is pushed and held. A lamp with a distinctly different color, 12, marks the position on the map of the apparatus and the user. This "You Are Here" lamp, wired in series with the other lamps, lights up whenever any of the buttons is pushed. I found no evidence of the invention's adoption in North America, but in the May 1920 Scientific American, then a weekly technology magazine, it reported an installation in the London Underground. In a photo of what editors called a most ingenious application of electricity, a user is about to select from myriad destinations. Multicolored lamps customized for a translucent map of the London subway used a square red light for the traveler's location, a white light for the destination, a green light to show where to change trains, and red to mark the final station. Scientific American's two-paragraph story was probably gleaned from a more complete account published 3 weeks earlier in the magazine's British counterpart, The Engineer. The London firm Silent Guide Limited had bought Merk-Wirz's British patent and recently installed a prototype at a single underground station, prompting orders for identical devices at other stations. Accompanying the article were front and back views of a map and directory wired for 250 destinations. Some were landmarks for public buildings, others were retail or commercial establishments. Publicity for Merk-Wirz's patent might have inspired other electric maps. One is this electrified city map patented in 1922 by Robert Gatliff, a window designer at a Miami, Florida hardware store. A patent examiner, wary of similarities to the earlier invention, whittled Gatliff's application down to a single claim, focused on the novelty of displaying alternative routes by streetcar or on foot, marked respectively by strings of green and blue lights. Whether Gatliff crafted a working prototype is uncertain. As a hardware store employee, he surely had ready access to the necessary components. Even so, placing and connecting the numerous intermediate lights needed for more than just a few destinations will require a wiring jungle far more complex than in the rear view of the Silent Guide. Less than 2 months after Gatliff's June 1921 filing, Frank Cummings sought a patent for this illuminated advertising device, which grouped non-circular destinations into categories, each represented on the right by a single button and a single label, such as drugstores. Small vertical walls divided the space below a transparent map into polygons, each with a single lamp. Cummings had worked as a vaudeville and stage actor in New York and Los Angeles. As a performer whose antics required carefully timed and positioned illumination, he no doubt understood the basics of electricity and lighting. Later in the decade, Thomas Richardson, an electrical engineer in North Carolina, positioned solenoids beneath a transparent map with streets and other reference features. A solenoid is a wire wound many times around an iron core. If the core is stationary, applying an electric current makes the solenoid an electromagnet. In Richardson's invention, each solenoid had a movable core or plunger with a broad, conspicuously colored head. When activated with a current, the plunger popped up to appear on the map. When the current was withdrawn, the plunger dropped backwards. Inclining the directory board still allowed gravity to pull deactivated plungers away from the map. The colored heads were more visible in daylight, and solenoids were deemed more reliable than lamps. In early 1931, Michael Abel, a self-employed advertising agent, filed to patent a device that represented locations with 3 digits, each with its own switch organized in vertical rows. Directory panels next to the map listed 3-digit addresses for each location. A switches panel next to the map allowed a user to set push-button switches for a specific destination. Shaded dots in this example describe the selection of location 1, 2, 3 on the map. The first digit refers to a group of up to 100 locations, and the second and third digits specify a location within the group. Abel's scheme allowed for 1,000 locations in 10 groups of 100. Anyway, pushing the start key allows current to flow to the lamp at location 1, 2, 3. Note the circuit diagram also includes a battery or power source and a so-called dash pot or mechanical damper, which keeps the chosen circuit open for a specific length of time. I originally written this talk for a 20-minute time slot. Then we had to shrink it down. And I have 4 slides that I'm not showing you now. If anybody wants to, during questioning, if there's time, I can go into it. If you see that green area there, this, I think, is the more complex of the inventions that I'm talking about this morning. There's a solenoid there that basically pulls down a bank of connectors that would basically make everything in group 1 eligible to receive power. And then subsequently, setting switch 2 for the second group would reduce the number of those places that could get power. And finally, the third switch would then eliminate all but 1. So it's a very clever thing. Abel's knowledge of electricity probably reflects an enthusiasm for electric cars. Although never as abundant as their gasoline-powered counterparts, electric vehicles were prominent between 1900 and 1920. In 1913, Abel had opened a dealership for Baker electric cars in Columbus, Ohio, where he lived. One additional patent complements the foregoing discussion. It was issued 4 decades later in 1974 to Coyote Johnson, a Tulsa, Oklahoma engineer and business executive at a firm that created safety materials for airlines and aircraft manufacturers. Johnson assigned his patent to his employer, but I could not confirm that the company ever used his map display system in one of its flight simulators. As described in the principal drawing, Johnson's invention was a mechanical framework for positioning lamps controlled by computer behind a translucent display board bearing a line map or aerial image. The setup was flexible, but once the lamp houses and color filters were located, further change was, to put it mildly, complicated. The 6 patents discussed here illustrate how clever people grasped possibilities, if not actual needs. Merk-Wirz linked a directory list with a map. Gatliff added specific routes. Cummings recognized building footprints as well as categories with multiple destinations. Richardson used solenoids to trigger map symbols more easily seen in daylight. Abel accommodated many more destinations and kept the lamps lit after a single push of the start button. And Johnson allowed the computer-controlled map to describe changing traffic signal conditions. These inventors added more or less progressively to earlier work, and savvy patent examiners filtered out non-original claims. And in harnessing electricity as a medium for interactive cartography, the first 5 heralded the potential of later developments based on the vacuum tube, the cathode ray tube, the original CRT, and the semiconductor. Two final observations. The first relates to occupation, experience, and motivation. As noted, all 6 patentees worked in settings that confirmed or conferred the requisite knowledge of electric circuits and cartographic applications. Hardly a surprising observation. And like most inventors who applied for a patent, they no doubt saw a formidable vetting as an accolade of achievement, if not a promise of profit. Indeed, only Merk-Wirz's invention seems to have been developed commercially, and then only in Britain. Thanks for listening.
We do have time for questions if anybody has one.
I thought that was really, really interesting. Back in '89, when I first moved to London, there's still some of these electric maps that are out of the tube. I mean, when you were coming out of the tube station, you could still press the button, and I absolutely loved it because you could really memorize names and then go out. And everybody also would carry the A to Z map to go to places. And I think we have become increasingly very lazy. The fact that we have all apps in our phones and so on. So I mean, I think it's such a beautiful and creative way of like putting the invention of the electricity, but also to motivate us to remember those streets before you go out into the street or take out your A to Z. So what's your point on that? I mean, how far we've gone and how far we can go back, and in order not to become too lazy with all these technology.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the same applications, the same, functionality is available in mall maps, and I don't know whether do they still have those in the London Underground? I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But something which is interactive, which lets you relate where you are to where you want to go. And you've heard the saying, "There's nothing new under the sun." And, this goes back, first electric orientation map, 1913. Obviously, there have been other improvements. I talked about some additions here, some of which were more practical than others.
Mark, that was a wonderful presentation. I missed the beginning of it, and so maybe I missed this, but can you draw a line between Harry Beck and the London subway map that you developed and the work that you're highlighting here?
Probably not, other than the fact that, Beck's map was intended as a printed map. And it's interesting, we saw yesterday the things actually were fairly small, which probably is an inducement for eye strain.
Was he an electrical person of any sort?
I doubt it. I think he was a graphic designer. Is Ken Field here? Okay.
An electrical engineer.
Oh, he was? Okay. So it sort of basically resembled a circuit diagram, and he was concerned, I guess, with the flow of subway cars, underground cars. Okay. And, certainly connectivity. It's interesting. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.